today we're going to talk about management consulting with Ashwin, and I've known Ashwin for quite a while now, and I thought it might be time for us to know a little bit about management consulting. So, firstly, Ashwin, thank you for joining, and if you want to just tell us a little bit about yourself, please, Ashwin.
Yeah, so Agman, thanks for the invite. My pleasure to actually join you for this discussion. A brief introduction about myself. So I've been in the management consulting space for close about just 5 years. Joined A.T. Kearney right out of B school. Worked across 10 different countries. And more recently, I've actually moved on to a corporate strategy role in the industry. Yeah, but I think I should be able to provide you my perspective on management consulting. As it is said many times, a lot of the answers depend. And in this case too, it would actually depend, and I can give you my perspective based on my experiences.
So it's funny you say that, Ashwin, because I think a lot of there's a joke on management consulting, right? That the first line that they always say is that it depends. So so I'm glad you started off on the right foot, Ashwin. But let's get started. So first thing, Ashwin, what is management consulting, right? So why is it needed, and how does it add value? Like, why would someone even be in the space or use a management consultant?
Okay, so you asked quite a few questions there. So let's break it down. Like first, what is management consulting, and then okay, how does it add value, right? So what is management consulting? So again, like this has been a meme-worthy topic, right? Like there's a management consultant, borrow your watch to tell you the time, right? And so on. And to be honest, at least in my view, that you can't have a very specific definition. So it'll have to be slightly more generic, just because of the scope and breadth of the work which is involved, right? So I would say management consulting would be anything which whose objective is to improve the performance of a business, right, or entity. And the problems could lie as to, okay, where should a company play, right? Which consumers it should target, what products, which it could be, how should they actually win the market? Should they look at a differentiated business model? Should be cost competitiveness? How should they be organized to achieve it? What is the right org structure? What roles are required? What's the right operating model? How should they operate to achieve success? And many more, right? So I think the scope depends on the business problem which the entity is facing. And yeah, you have consultants then working to actually solve these problems. In terms of the value which is added, right? So let me think. So there are like a few things where consultants add value. The more obvious one is the outside in. So consultants can actually, because they work with different companies across industries within the same industry, they can actually bring those benchmarks of the outside in and compare it, right? And see how a client is actually doing against those. But I think the less obvious ones aren't, and what I've seen in my experience is, number one, consultants are able to break through silos, right? So most companies, you work for a corporate yourself, is like there is inherently these silos which form, and information doesn't flow through these silos, and there's always some inefficiencies, right, when these silos flow. So I think consultants are able to break through these silos and get a holistic picture, right? The second value add, I would think, is actually there is no agency effect. When I say agency effect, I mean every BU which is actually doing its work has its own motive, right, for actually pushing a certain agenda or a message and so on. I think consultants they're third party, so they are actually can actually recommend what is right for the company. So I think that is a second one. The third one would be on a similar note is they can get things done. They can push a CEO's agenda right? So they don't have, like if you're in a company, you'll always be wary about the relationships which you hold, right? And and that will actually decide what you say, what actions you take, and so on, right?
Yeah, yeah.
I think consultants, number one, are empowered by the top leadership, and that is where their focus lies. Yeah. So they don't need to play this internal politics because they're third party. So that is easier, right? Of course, relationships do matter because they are clients and so on. But I think it's easier than being inside the system.
Yeah.
And finally, I think much faster. So consultants work longer hours. They have better support system, research teams, production teams, and so on. So they can turn around things much quicker, right? So I'm sure there could be like other reasons where the value add comes from, but this is currently the reasons which are on top of my mind.
Interesting. So it sounds like a very interesting and a very diverse field, Ashwin. So can you talk a little bit about catchment areas? So where do management consultants come from? Are they born? Are they created? Are there specific degrees? I mean, where do these folks, how do you even get them?
Okay, so typically, so this is, I would say, over time, there has, and it's a fairly mature industry, right? Like over 100 years old. So over time, I think there are like certain hotspots or catchment areas, as you call it, where these management consultants are actually procured, right? If you want to call it that, and developed. So I think there are target schools, both at an undergraduate level and at a postgraduate level, where the top firms go to recruit. And typically that's where majority of the talent comes from. It's either they do internship or they get like direct offers at the end of the program. All consulting firms, at least the top ones, look for spikes in individuals. And the folks who come to the top schools, like the target schools, tend to have these spikes. But that's not the end all. Like there are consultants who join laterally too. So especially in today's time, right? Like I'll give you a good example. Like there's this whole talk about digital disruption, right? Which is affecting all different industries.
Yeah.
You see, like it's important for management consultants to actually adopt it into their solutions and recommendations and so on, right? But the older strategy thinking does not give you the level of detail or depth which you need. Recommendations. So then if there are like these certain niche areas, right, which are up and coming, and there are people who have invested time in this field, and then it's not really necessary to be part of these schools and so on, right? It is at the end of the day, if you're able to add value, then you can actually make it in management consulting. Having said that, I think there's a lot of emphasis on communication, problem solving, project management, so these kind of things. But that is true of most jobs, I guess.
So yeah. Interesting. You use the term spike, Ashwin. What do you? Can you explain, to a layman like me, what that means?
Okay, so spike is so when you hear about a person or listen about a person, right? There are certain things which actually sets that person apart, right? Or in a very small set of people. So the spike could be in academics. So you could say that, okay, so it's in the top 5% of his or her class, right? Or it could be in sports. You could say that he or she has represented their country in so and so sport, right? It could be on leadership. This person actually, she went to Antarctica for an expedition and led a team over there, right? So I think there are like different spikes which you look for. It could be some in work itself, right? Like somebody who, like an entrepreneur who started a business and might have failed, but achieved certain amount of scale and knows the landscape really. So I think there can be like different spikes which can differentiate you. And I think there's no set definition for it. I think it also depends which time period you're in, which geography you're in, where that spike would actually change, right? So what would be a spike in one place maybe would not be a spike somewhere else. But what the spike tells you is that this person has gone over and beyond to do something compared to his other peers.
Interesting. Okay. So, Ashwin, assume I'm a management consultant now, or a strategy consultant, or whatever cool term you would wish to give me, and I've been in the space, let's say 5, 10, 15, 20 years, x number of years, right? And I'm thinking of my next steps, right? So, how does career progression look like for me? What are my different options, and where do management consultants go to grow and build their career, Ashwin?
Okay, so let me answer this in two ways. Yeah. So one is like within management consulting itself, and then okay, if a management consultant exits out of management consulting. Okay. So within management consulting itself, like typically out of B school, you join as an associate or junior associate, and then I would say like the career progression is much faster than industry. I think it's also by design because of the up or out policy. So there is um, like there are spots which can actually be filled and to ensure you.
Interesting.
So in consulting itself, like you go from an associate to a manager, from manager to either principal or associate partner, and then to partners, right? So it's fairly lean as such, and can go as quickly as 7 to 8 years to actually to go right up to the top. Then I think there comes to a point, I think, which different consultants take, right? Either you make partner and continue to be a partner, or anyway through this process, as you go from associate to partner, you decide to exit out to follow your interests, passions, or any other opportunity which you believe is more in line with your interests, I guess. The good thing about consulting is that most of the skills are very transferable. So whichever area do you actually exit out to, a lot of this toolkit which you learn during consulting can be actually applied across different
used.
levels.
Interesting. So, Ashwin, there is this perception, right? Management consultants, they fly business class or first class or whatever. They live in 5-star hotels. They go for fancy dinners, and probably, I don't know, work. Of course, they work quite a few hours. So, are there are there myths or misconceptions that you would wish to talk about, and are there reasons why people should not join this field, right? So some of the things that I said, right? Always flying business class, and airline miles and hotel points and all of that. So can you talk a little bit about this
Let me understand your question better. So what are you looking for, like the pros and cons of consulting? Like what are you getting at?
Yeah, maybe pros and cons is a good way to put it. So can you talk about that, please? Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. So I think, so let's talk about the pros, right? So in terms of professional development, I think it's a great career to have, because just because of the nature of the work which you do. So it's like every project which you do is like a new job, right? Because it's a new team, it's a new client, can be a new client, it's a new topic, which actually I think could be a new industry altogether. And so the level of professional development which you get as you go through like multiple such opportunities or projects is phenomenal, right? I think the second thing is access to leadership. So by nature, I think management consultants get access to like top level leadership. So you get to learn, right, by being in their presence. How are they making their decision to all the questions they're asking?
Interesting.
The third is, I think, there's a lot of rigor. So you can you actually learn to apply the consulting toolkit. There's always very high focus on achieving perfection. Right? And all of that, as I said earlier, a lot of these skill sets are transferable. Then there's side benefits, as you said. So you get to travel well for certain trips. You get to travel business class. You can use your points to upgrade yourself to business class. You earn a lot of points. You live in good hotels. You go to good places to eat. So all of that, I think, would be true. On the flip side, like if you talk about the cons, so I think it takes a lot from you. So you are continuously working long hours, and these are not just long hours, but intense long hours, right? So it's not like doing mundane work. You actually have to be thinking through it. You need to manage your communication both within the team, outside the team. So it is fairly intense and it is long hours. Then I think there's depends person to person, but there's a stress factor also because you get access to leadership. But let's say you're making a presentation every other week to this top leadership, to the CEO, right? So you need to come up with really new insights and stuff which is not really or stuff which will be interesting to the top leadership, right? So that stress is there. And because of this, you actually end up missing out on your social life, right? Because I think typically, on average, a consultant would be working between 60 to 80 hours a week, and it can be more, right? There could be certain instances where it could be less, but I think on average, people must be doing 60 hours. So I think your social life takes a hit sometimes, though there are people who are very good at managing it, but there are also people who find it difficult, right? Because you're so exhausted after, imagine you're taking a flight, a 4-hour flight every week, right? And then you're working fairly hard, right? Not getting enough sleep. Then on the weekends, maybe you're not that motivated to go for that 20-kilometer run, right? You miss out on social events. So I think these are like the cons of consulting. So it does take away things from you, but there are people who have managed it really well, right? So there are people who set boundaries and who have managed to achieve both, right? So great health, great fitness, managed to spend time with their family, their friends, sports, and also excellent consulting. But that takes a lot of effort, is what I would say.
Interesting. Yeah. So you remind me of a joke about consulting, Ashwin, which says that how do you get 10 years of experience is do 5 years of consulting, right? So I think, so when you said the 60 to 80 hours, I kind of just thought of that, but that's very interesting. So another question, Ashwin, I think just maybe slightly more philosophical, and I think you touched upon this briefly when you were talking about management consulting is, so imagine I'm a company and, I have a lot of resources, right? And I wouldn't say unlimited, but, a lot, right? So my options are one, I go to, I go to a B school and pick 10 MBAs and say, hey, you guys work on these problems, right? And, and all the new problems, you guys just work on it. What is stopping me from doing that as against go to a management consulting company and hire them? So why would I use a management consulting firm, Ashwin?
Yeah. So I think some part of this answer can be derived from the value adds, right, which I told you earlier. There's certain things by design. So these silos will be there by design, right? And I think it's easier for an external third-party company to actually break through some of this. And then there is their own agenda of different parts of the organization, there's politics and so on, right? So I think that's one angle to it. I think the second angle of it is think of it as a system where, so you're basically talking about an internal consulting team, right? Within any company. And a lot of companies are doing this also, and they have done it successfully also. But think of it in terms of the focus, right? So these folks would want to move ahead in their lives at some point of time, take a business leadership role in that company, right? So those things are already present. Right? The second part is like in consulting, it is the people who are doing problem solving, and that is how the system is designed. Their bread and butter is to provide these services. But for a company, the bread and butter is to actually provide their product to the market and what was their proposition is. So this will always be a support function for them.
Interesting.
In a company. Whereas a management consulting firm, there's a revenue generating function. So there's a lot more focus on developing these skills, investing on people, and so on. And of course, then the earlier parts which I told you, right, is around agency effect, pushing and breaking through silos, getting the outside in. So I think these things are also there. But having said that, there are companies who manage consulting really well internally also. I think that the design is more, uh, I think the design is more favorable when you come from the outside.
Bring an external perspective. Okay, that's very interesting, Ashwin. So another question, Ashwin, is, management consultants generally are known to solve problems, right? I mean, I kind of look at them as, I have this specific problem that I need solved, whether entering a new market or, positioning my product or pricing my product or, marketing, whatever you want to call it, right? So is there a high level list of steps that you have, that you follow? It could be something that, in your mind, that you say, okay, here's the way I want to think through this problem. Is there anything that exists for management consultants or, strategy consultants or consultants in general, Ashwin?
Yeah, so I would say, so you're talking about frameworks. So, so we do have frameworks, like for the most common problems. So what a framework is supposed to do is help you think through what are the different elements while solving a problem, right? So for example, if you're talking about a growth strategy, you need to know, like, the framework which you typically apply is, okay, where to play, how to win, like the parts of the framework, right? So you should know where you should play, who are the right customers, right geographies, right products, and so on. Right? Where are you going to play in that? And then when you say how to win, okay, what is your value proposition? What is your point of differentiation? How will you be better than the competition? And so on. So these frameworks help you think through it. But I think in this business, at least in my experience, I think you cannot just blindly apply frameworks from one client to another and so on, right?
Interesting.
So typically what we do is that we use a hypothesis driven way of problem solving. So from these frameworks, we actually come up with, build an issue tree, like where you have like the big question, and then you have like different sub questions to it, and then you make assertions on whether one thing would work or not.
Interesting.
Right?
Okay.
Yeah. And then we keep testing for these hypotheses to see what makes sense for a particular, in a particular context. So I think context is very important. You can't just do cookie cutter of applying one framework to another place.
Interesting. Okay. So that's very interesting, Ashwin. So I guess, what is your advice? So let's say that there is this MBA, student or grad who's or I don't know, someone somewhere who's looking to be a consultant. Ashwin, what is your advice to him or her in terms of what to do and how to get into the space and be successful?
So again, there are quite a few questions which are packed in.
Okay, so then let's break it down into what is your advice and then what makes one successful, maybe.
Okay, so I think so. Let me answer this in a way, right? So let's say a person has just come into management consulting. So what do they need to do to be successful? So let me answer that first. So I think one important skill set. So, and some of these I think attribute skill sets are also important for other places outside management consulting also. But I think it is within management consulting, these are the top ones which you need in my perspective. So number one, I think, is people skills. So I think it's very important to be able to understand people. When I say understand people, both internally and externally. So when you speak to your clients, you should understand their agenda, right? Where are they coming from? Able to read a room, right? So that you can think on your feet. Also think about it like this, right? A lot of times the CEO brings you in, but then you're working with his 1 or 2 or 3 levels down below him to develop your recommendations, right? Which basically means from outside is coming and testing what these guys or these the team has actually done. So they have to like you to be able to share things with you and trust in you. So I think people skills, and even internally, right? Like if you have to motivate your team to put in these long hours.
Mm-hmm.
You need to manage your partners and principals so that they actually trust you that this will go successfully. So I think people is one.
Mm-hmm.
Then I think the second is you should have an opinion, take a stand, right? So I think the best consultants which I have seen, right, take a stand, have an opinion, right? And of course, it is an informed opinion or stand, right? So you need to do your research, you need to read up all of these things, but don't sit on the fence, right? So take a stand, be what you think is right. I think that will get you a lot more respect and trust with folks, right? So because it's easier to sit on the fence and not take a position, right? You might be wrong once in a while, but then accept it, correct yourself. But I think it's something important to actually have. Then I think the third thing is you need to be very good to be able to set boundaries. So as I said, like it's a very demanding job and so on. So you should be good at managing your time, setting boundaries, right? So that you're able to actually spend time on other things which matter to you outside work. Your family, it could be sports, it could be anything. And, these all three of them, I think, are easier said and done, and they come with some level of practice. But I think, yeah, these would be the top three at least, which come to my mind. Of course, right? Like if you see like basic competencies, you should be good at problem solving. You should be good at communication. You should be able to tell a story. You should be you should exhibit the right values and things like that. So those things go without saying. You have to be very curious to be able to be motivated to do this work, right? So I think those things are true, but I think those are true for other professions outside management consulting also. I think for me, these are the 3 or 4 which actually worked really well.
Interesting. And I guess the other part of the question was your advice to I don't know, maybe newcomers or people who aspire to be in that space, maybe Ashwin.
So advice as to how to get into management consulting? Is that what the question?
So I was just going to think, so maybe that's, so you ask a good question, and I guess that's the management consultant in you to make sure you have clarity on the question. So one is definitely how do you get in, but also what should I do to get in, right? So like what skill sets do I need to work on, or are there specific things I need to do, or is there someone I need to be in order to get into the space, Ashwin?
Okay.
And I don't know if that's too many questions again, but you get the gist of it, right? So
yeah. So I think there are like different parts, as I told you. So I think it's well known which schools, which consulting firm hires from which schools, right? So I think that kind of research can be done. And then once you go there, I think it's about creating those spikes, right? One way or the other. I think it's also important to network. You need to understand which is the right fit for you as a consulting firm too, right? Because though most top tier consulting firms are very similar to each other, but each one of them has their own culture type of people. So I would encourage people to actually understand that, to see where he or she best fits into in terms of where their interest areas like, right? Because as I think it's important to really enjoy this work and people you're to be able to do the long hours and the intensity and to be motivated, be curious, all of these things. So I think the matter. So I think you should spend time to understand that. And then of course, right, like when you're preparing for interviews, I think it's well documented. You need to be good at solving cases and getting your communication right and so on. So I think that is well documented as such over any any secondary source, right? Like you can look up the internet for that.
Interesting. Okay. So I guess one of my favorite questions of late, Ashwin, and it's starting to become like, I think I might just end up making it like a regular in these is to talk about leadership. So can you tell us your perspective on leadership? And again, I'm going to keep it a little open-ended in the sense that you could either talk about what is good leadership, or what is bad leadership, or what is your opinion on leadership? What should a leader do? So can you just maybe give us like a brief overview of your perspective on leadership, and maybe even advice to people who want to become good leaders, Ashwin?
Yeah. So again, this is my perspective, right? I truly believe. So one thing which consulting teaches you, okay, so there's a good mantra actually, is that there is no one set formula to be successful. Okay, like it could be based on, like in consulting, you have partners who are very strong on content. Then there'll be some partners who are very strong on maintaining a relationship, reading the room, understanding the agenda. There'll be some who are a mix of both, and so on. And this is true across levels, right? So there's no one set part for success. Uh, Having said that, I think for each person, there are like different qualities which they believe works for them, and I can tell you what those would be for me. I think first one is that a leader should be ambitious. So you need to be pushing the envelope, or moving to a new space, exploring something new. There has to be an element of reaching the next level, right? And that drives your vision, mission, your motivation to get there. Right? So I think it's very important to be ambitious. I think second, with being ambitious, it's important to remain humble and have humility. Be able to be, you should be approachable. You should be able to listen to folks and take in the right advice. I mean, and this could also be that owning up when you make a few mistakes, right? So I believe that you earn a lot more respect, and the team would actually support you a lot more, right? So being ambitious, being humble, and I think the third thing is, and this is something which I'm learning as I make the transition to corporate, is to be able to understand the difference between IQ and I would say EQ maybe.
EQ, emotional quotient. Okay.
Yeah. So I think IQ. So of course you'll find a lot of smart people, right? And there's another pro of consulting, by the way. I should have mentioned that you have a lot of smart people around you always. And you should appreciate and get their views. But there are also, as a leader, I think you also need to understand that there are people who might not be that intellectually smart, but have the what do I say, smartness of experience, right? They have done this, they know the ins and outs, and you should not discount this, because this also means a lot in the real world. So I think it's important for a leader to also appreciate and learn from that. Yeah, and then of course, right, there is an EQ element to thing which is covered in managing people and so on.
Yeah.
So that is also there. So I think these are the ones at this stage of my life currently, which I think are important. If you ask me this question, maybe a few months down the line or a few years down the line, it will change.
Interesting. Yeah. And I think I'm definitely going to do that, Ashwin, because this was very insightful for me. I think I've, as you know, a lot of these things that I'm starting to do, I'm learning a lot every time I talk to someone. And what is very interesting is I know you as a friend, but I know very little about what you do, in your career, right? I mean, like, you know me, I know you, but in your career, I don't know a lot about what you do. And I think this was, it's very insightful to me, at least. And I'm sure we should probably do this again in, I don't know when, but, as and when you get some time, because you're like extremely busy, but I'm sure we can find some time for that. And, but I just want to say thank you, Ashwin. I think this was extremely insightful, and I think I've learned a lot about consulting, and actually a few other things as well about leadership and things like that you've spoken. So I just want to say thanks a lot, Ashwin, for your time.
Yeah, man. No worries. Very happy to do it. Thanks for the opportunity.